Hi and welcome back. This is the 10th video in the Test First development series. And today we're going to talk about test setup and teardown. In other words, we're going to talk about how to efficiently run code before and after your tests. So far, our little coffee shop app is very simple, artificially so. And our tests are also pretty simple, but in a real app, in an actual application, the data requirements and the data landscape is going to get a lot more complex, and getting your test cases set up properly and making sure everything gets cleaned up after becomes really important. So that's what we're going to be looking at, is kind of how to manage all the data that needs to be loaded and cleaned up to make our tests run properly. NUnit makes it really easy to write code that executes before and after each test. Here's how you do it. So let's write a method called public void test setup. And we can decorate this with the setup attribute. And by giving it that attribute, NUnit is going to run this one before each test. Note that this method can be named whatever you want. You just have to give it the proper attribute. Likewise, there is a teardown attribute that you can put on a method. And that one will run after each test. Now, at the test fixture level, we can do a one-time setup method. And that's going to run once, and it runs before the first test. And not surprisingly, there is a one-time teardown attribute to let us do this. And this runs once after the last test. So to see this in action, let's just set some breakpoints. I'll set breakpoints here at the beginning of each of those methods. And let's set a breakpoint here at the beginning of our cancel order test and our get order status test. And then we can go into our test runner, and I'll select those two tests, and we're going to debug them, and so we can see what happens. So the first breakpoint to hit is our test fixture setup. So this will run once, and then test setup runs before each test, and now we're into cancel order. And then teardown happens, test teardown, that's after the cancel order test. And now test setup has happened again. We're into the get order status test. The teardown happens, the test teardown, and then last one-time teardown as we exit. Pretty simple. So I think the only other thing to talk about is what would cause you to want to do this? Why do you need this? So let me show you something. I've got a little SQL Management Studio window open, and I did select star from coffee order. And you can see I've accumulated almost 10,000 coffee order rows. So for our little app and our little test, that doesn't matter. But you can imagine in the real world with a complicated app, that could be a problem where one test will be thrown off by the fact that there might already be data in the database, or you might get different results. I guess the point is you don't really want the outcome of one test to influence the other tests. You want them to be independent. So a thing we might do here is we might say, clear the orders table. Just clear it out before every single test. And to do that, we would likely have to do like a backdoor, like open our own SQL connection from within the test library and run a SQL delete statement and just backdoor clear out that data. That would be acceptable. And what about test fixture setup? What about a one-time test? Well, here's a real example. I was recently working on an application which is an online exam administration application. It's a web app with an ASP.NET middle tier and a SQL Server backend, and we've got our business logic in a DLL just like this. So we were starting to build the grading system. That's where an examiner can submit their grades or reset their grades or review their grades, or an administrator could get a report of grades. And what we realized is for any of that to work, you need a whole bunch of stuff set up ahead of time. You need an exam, you need examiners, you need a schedule, you need candidates, a grade scale. You need all this stuff kind of bootstrapped before you can even begin writing those grade tests. So we had a test fixture with a whole series of tests that could all use kind of the same setup. So we used this to do a bunch of data loading, and we just kind of got that exam ready for those tests. And then when we were done, we cleared it all out. So I don't need to code that here, but I think you can imagine in complicated applications, you want to be able to set up before your tests and then clean up after and make sure your tests run in a consistent manner. Okay, so I'll leave that there. You can type out your own code and maybe give some thought to real situations where this would help you.